Welcome to Notebook Summaries. In this quick history, we're exploring the story of a nation forged in the crucible of the Caribbean, Jamaica.
Jamaica, land of wood and water. It's just a beautiful name, isn't it? Well, that's what the island's first inhabitants, the Taino people, called it. Long before any Europeans arrived, they had built this really well-organized society, living off the island's incredible natural abundance. Okay, let's dive into this story.
All right, Section 1, Land of Wood and Water, the Indigenous Foundation. So yeah, Jamaica's story starts way before any European ships were even on the horizon. We're talking around 800 AD when the Arawak and Taino peoples first settled the island. They set up these big networks of agricultural villages, led by chiefs they called caciques, growing crops like cassava and just developing a really vibrant society.
Okay, on to Section 2, Conquest, Pirates, and Sugar. The colonial shattering. And yep, shattering is absolutely the right word, because in 1494, everything changed. Christopher Columbus arrived, and that moment kicked off centuries of European colonial rule that would completely and radically transform the island forever. So let's break this down. First, in 1494, the Spanish show up. They imposed this brutal system of forced labor that, combined with all the new diseases they brought, just nearly wiped out the entire Taino population. Then you fast forward to 1655, and the English muscled their way in and conquered Jamaica. At first, they turned Port Royal into this notorious pirate haven, think Henry Morgan. But then they pivoted to something even more profitable, and honestly, way more brutal: sugar.
20-1. Just let that number sink in for a second. The sugar industry was so incredibly labor-intensive that the British forcibly brought hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans to the island. It got to the point that by the mid-1800s, the enslaved black population outnumbered the white population by that staggering ratio, 20-1. The scale is just mind-boggling.
All right, Section 3, a rebellion in the blood, resistance under pressure. I mean, when you create a system with that kind of immense pressure and brutality, what do you think is going to happen? Resistance. It was constant, and really, from the very beginning, this spirit of rebellion, this fight for freedom against impossible odds, became a defining part of Jamaican life.
So this resistance really took two major forms. First, you had the Maroons. These were descendants of escaped Africans who fled into the super rugged, mountainous parts of the island and just waged these legendary guerrilla wars against the British. They knew the land so well, they actually forced the British to sign peace treaties recognizing their freedom. Then, at the same time, you had the revolts right on the sugar plantations. Enslaved Jamaicans launched more than a dozen major uprisings. Most were brutally put down, but they never, ever stopped chipping away at that colonial system.
A perfect example of this is Tacky's revolt in 1760. This was an absolute nightmare for the colonial order. Tacky, an enslaved overseer, led a rebellion that took over several plantations. They even seized a fort to get their hands on firearms and gunpowder. Now, it was eventually suppressed, partly by Maroons who were bound by their treaty, but the aftermath, whoa, it sent this shockwave of pure terror through the planter class. It was this powerful, undeniable proof that their entire system was basically built on a volcano, and that symbol of resistance still echoes in Jamaican identity to this day.
Okay, let's move on. Section 4, the long road to freedom. The cracks appear. You can only keep a system like that going for so long. This constant rebellion started to take its toll. By the 1800s, you had this relentless pressure coming from inside Jamaica, plus a growing anti-slavery movement back in Britain. All of that together meant the whole colonial system was really starting to show some serious cracks.
And the final straw, the thing that really broke the camel's back, was the Baptist War of 1831. It was led by a really charismatic enslaved preacher named Samuel Sharp. And get this, it actually started as a peaceful general strike for wages, but it just exploded into the largest rebellion in the entire British West Indies, involving up to 60,000 people. The way it was brutally crushed by the ruling plantation owners, it absolutely horrified the public back in Britain and really sped up the push to end slavery for good.
And this is where you see the direct impact of that sacrifice. The Baptist War was a huge reason why the British Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act just a couple years later. Now, it wasn't instant freedom. They had this really unpopular apprenticeship system for a few years. But finally, on August 1st, 1838, full emancipation was granted to everyone.
So with slavery abolished, the fight for freedom didn't stop, it just shifted. It moved from the plantations into the political arena. The labor riots of the 1930s were a huge turning point, and they brought two towering figures to the forefront. And what's wild is that they were cousins, Alexander Bustamante and Norman Manley.
They channeled the hopes of the people and founded the two political parties that would go on to dominate Jamaican politics for the next 100 years, the JLP and the PNP. So, Section 5, Forging a Nation, Independence and Cultural Explosion. Right, so after decades of slowly getting more and more self-government, including a brief stint in something called the West Indies Federation, which they ultimately rejected, the final step on that long, long road to freedom was about to happen.
And there it is, August 6, 1962. Jamaica becomes an independent nation, with Alexander Bustamante serving as its very first prime minister. But here's the thing. Forging a national identity was about way more than just politics. It unleashed this incredible explosion of culture that the whole world was about to notice.
I mean, just look at this list. This small island started having this huge, outsized impact on the entire planet. Its music, ska, rocksteady, and of course reggae, made famous by the legendary Bob Marley, it became a global language for resistance and unity. Why? Because it was born right out of that history of struggle. Then you have the Rastafari movement, offering a new spiritual vision rooted in black empowerment. And we can't forget the athletes. Jamaica's sprinters started to just dominate on the world stage.
Okay, final section. The modern Jamaican crucible, legacy and future. So in the decades since independence, Jamaica has had to keep grappling with this really complex legacy of its past, all while trying to carve out its future in a world that's changing super fast.
And modern Jamaica is really a nation of profound contrasts. On one hand, it's a global powerhouse in culture and athletics, right? But on the other, it struggles with some significant foreign debt. It has a stable democracy, but one that's marked by this intense political rivalry that at times has fueled the kind of violence that led to the 2010 Tivoli incursion.
So from the land of wood and water to the modern day, the story of Jamaica is one of transformation under intense pressure. But the key thing to take away is that this long, difficult history of resilience, of rebellion, and of incredible creativity isn't just in the past. It's the very engine that's shaping the nation's path forward as it confronts the challenges of the 21st century. If you found this quick history of Jamaica interesting, you should definitely check out our playlist of other quick country histories. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to Notebook Summaries for more breakdowns of complex topics. Thanks for watching.